Hello, Dan again here. We're going to look today at 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 1 to 12. So please press pause. If you haven't read the passage already, please do that and pray for our time together. Thanks. So Stat Mission, and therefore OCC, is in the market for a new pastor. What should we be looking for? What makes for a trustworthy Christian leader? Many years ago, I was rock climbing on a long 200-meter cliff with some friends, and we got stuck behind another group. And the other group was being led by a guy called Matthew, who really wanted to impress the rest of his group and show them how fantastic he was. Problem was, he wasn't fantastic. We got stuck because of him. We all got stuck in the middle of the night on a very cold cliff. Now that's dangerous. But what is even more dangerous is following an untrustworthy Christian leader. This can have eternal consequences. And so I ask again, what makes for a trustworthy Christian leader? Expanding that a little bit, what makes for a trustworthy, let's say, Sunday school leader or community group leader, or even more so, a teacher, an employer, a boss? Well, what Paul is going to show us in this passage is that a trustworthy leader is someone who doesn't seek to get for themselves, but seeks to give to others and to please God, their Father. You'll remember the context in Thessalonica. This is an uncertain church. They're uncertain about their own salvation. They're uncertain about their whole church. Now it seems, building on that uncertainty, it seems that there's the enemies of Paul, his opponents in Thessalonica, are spreading bad reports about him. So they're telling the Thessalonian Christians, they're saying, oh, this Paul guy, he is not trustworthy. Paul just wants, he wants fame, he wants followers, he's just selfish. You can't trust him, he's tricking you. And therefore, your faith, your church, it's all fake. And this is leaving the Thessalonians with quite a bit of uncertainty. This is a common thing. You may have heard of a pastor being exposed as a fake or exposed as a significant sinner. And what happens to the rest of the church? The church members become uncertain. Wow, if they're a fake, then what about me? But in our passage, Paul is going to defend himself. He reminds the Thessalonians how he actually lived when he was with them. He says to them, you know how I lived. Did you see that as you read? How many times he says, you know, or you're my witnesses. Verse 1, 2, 5, 9, 10, 11. In summary, what Paul wants to say is this. You know, Thessalonians, I didn't come to get something from you, but to please God by giving something to you. Therefore, I'm trustworthy. And therefore, you're a real church. You're the real thing. Have confidence. So that's what we're going to look at tonight. Two main points, verses 1 to 7. I came, says Paul, to please God, not people. And number 2, verse 7 to 12, I came like a mother and like a father. We're going to try to apply it as well as we go along. So first of all, verses 1 to 7, I came to please God, not people. Read with me from verse, I've put my Bible away. Read with me from verse 1. Paul says, you know, brothers and sisters, that our visit to you was not without result. So he's disagreeing with those people who were saying, oh, Paul's a fake. No, our visit was not without results. We had previously suffered and been treated outrageously in Philippi, as you know, but with the help of our God, we dared to tell you his gospel in the face of strong opposition. Paul was just in Philippi. He shared the gospel. What happened? He got beaten and thrown in prison. Then he comes to Thessalonica, and there's lots of opposition to him. So what does he do? Well, if he was someone who wanted to get something, he wouldn't say anything. He'd shut up. He wouldn't speak about Jesus. Because he understands how this works. I speak of Jesus, I suffer. So what does Paul do? He says, I took courage in God to speak the gospel to you. Paul's obviously not a guy who's just after, his own skin. He's not just thinking of himself. And in verses 3 to 4, Paul really digs into his motivations. Why did he keep speaking the gospel even though it meant he would suffer? Well, he tells us, verse 3 and 4. For the appeal we make does not spring from error or impure motives, nor are we trying to trick you. On the contrary, we speak as those approved by God to be entrusted with the gospel. We are not trying to please people, but God who tests our hearts. There you go. You've probably all been tricked by someone at some point, someone who just wanted to get something out of you, get some money out of you perhaps. It's worse when pastors do this. It's not easy to spot sometimes. Verse 5, Paul says, people sometimes put on a mask to cover up their greed. I've been told of pastors who style themselves as a spiritual parent, and then they expect their spiritual children to provide for them. I think that's just a mask to cover up greed. But Paul says that's not me. Paul says, I didn't do it like that. Verse 4, he says, I didn't come to please people. Now that might sound a bit weird to you. You might think, what's wrong with pleasing people? It kind of sounds nice. But can I say it's deadly for a pastor? Or let me put it like this. If you always walk out of church pleased, beware. Beware the pastor who, verse 5, flatters you, who always says nice things about you, and who never points out your sin, who never says the hard things. I was speaking to some of my students recently about Jesus' call to deny ourselves, take up our cross, and follow him. And they said to me afterwards, they said, how come we never hear that preached anymore? It's a good question. Perhaps the pastors are trying to please people for their own ends. Beware the preacher who seeks to please people, because they seek to please you so they can get something out of you. Verse 6, they're seeking praise from people. And I've got to say, quite honestly, I find this really challenging, because I want you to like me. I even want you to praise me. Please don't, by the way, please don't. Do you see there's an insecurity in me? There's an insecurity in many leaders that causes them to need to get something from people. And it happens in all kinds of leadership, in the world, in the community, in our families. We have a lack, an insecurity, and so we feel we need to get something from the people we need rather than simply give to them. Paul, on the other hand, is absolutely secure in God and is able to just give himself for others. You see, Paul's great motivation, verse 4, is to please his God. It's very interesting, actually. His motivation in the first place has nothing to do with the Thessalonians. It's nothing about them in the first place. It's about him and his Lord. It's about his relationship with his master. Imagine for a moment you have $1 million. That might be easy to imagine or hard to imagine, I'm not sure. Imagine you have it and you want to move it from Windhoek to Chababis. Who will you entrust it to? Will you entrust it to the person who wants praise and wants to get for themselves? Probably not. Or would you entrust it to someone like Paul, who wants to please his master and wants to give, not to get? That's what Paul is like. And Paul is absolutely thankful to God, honoured by the fact that God has approved him and entrusted not $1 million to him, but has entrusted him with something far more valuable, the word of life, the gospel. And Paul just wants to please that God. Can I say, we're looking for a new pastor. This is essential. We need a pastor whose desire is to please their master, to please the Lord. Someone whose ministry springs from a deep, strong relationship with God. I was reading some research a few years ago about pastors who give up or stuff up. And the research found, if you want to stop that from happening, the best thing, the strongest preventative is this. The pastor must have a strong relationship with the Lord. It sounds simple, but that's it. This is what Paul has. This is why Paul is so secure and can just give himself to others. He's 100% sure that God has approved him and entrusted him with the gospel. God has accepted him, and so he is free to give himself. You look at verse 6. Paul says, I could have been the big man. I could have come and been a burden to you because I am an apostle of Christ. I'm an apostle of Christ. You do what I say. He could have done that, but he didn't, because he's not insecure. His desire is to please his master, and so Paul could come like a child, not pushing himself forward. Do you know why the Lord approves Paul? I think it's because Paul is like him. Paul is like Jesus. Paul wants to give and not to get. My brothers and sisters, please rejoice in this truth. Our God, he doesn't want to get something from you, first of all, but he came to give himself to you and for you. So as we finish this first point, let's zoom out again and remember the context. There's these opponents. Paul is not trustworthy. Paul is a fake. Paul is selfish. Paul tricked you. Therefore, your church is a nothing. But Paul says, really? Thessalonians, you know how I was among you. You know I wasn't selfish. I didn't come to get something. I came to give. I came to please God. Therefore, I'm trustworthy. Trust me. And therefore, your faith is legitimate. You are a church in God the Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. But Paul actually wants to give two more reasons why he can be trusted. Verses 7 to 12. And they are, I was like a mother to you. I was like a father to you. Let's read from verse 7, from the second half. Just as a nursing mother cares for her children, so we cared for you. Because we loved you so much, we were delighted to share with you not only the gospel of God, but our lives as well. Aren't nursing mothers just so selfish, aren't they? You know, getting up in the middle of the night, always feeding these children, always changing nappies. They're so selfish, aren't they? No, no. What does a nursing mother get from their baby? Sleepless nights and sore nipples. That's about it, right? That's what Paul didn't come to get. He came like a mother caring for them. He cares for them. This is so much more than a job for Paul. See what it says? He said, because we loved you so much, we were delighted. It wasn't just we were willing. No, we were delighted to share with you not just the words of the gospel, but our lives as well. You see, this is not just a job. Have you ever met a pastor who preaches the message, then they're gone? They don't engage. I heard recently of a pastor who, once the whole church is gathered, she is carried in by some people, and before church ends, she's carried out again. No engagement. That is not what Paul is like. He shared his life with them. And as he shared his life, do you know what the people saw? Verse 10. Verse 10, you are witnesses, and so is God, of how holy, righteous, and blameless we were among you who believed. Paul didn't just tell them the gospel. He showed them the gospel and how the Christian life works. I feel immensely privileged to have had mentors who camped with me, washed cars, played music with me, and at the same time, as they shared life, they showed me how to live as a Christian. They showed me the gospel. This is the kind of pastor you want. Not one who's out of touch, but one who shares their life with you and shows you the gospel, shows us how to live as a Christian. And I think it's right for a pastor to be like this because, well, that's what Jesus is like, isn't it? God didn't stay at a distance, far away and out of touch. He came near in the person of Jesus. He ate with sinners. He died for sinners. And any pastor has to echo that gospel in the way they live, not just in the way they speak. If you meet a pastor who's not like this, don't trust them. There's my warning. But can I say, this is true for all of us. If you want to share Jesus with an unbeliever, don't just speak. Show them your life. If you're a parent or you're a ministry leader, don't just tell your kids, don't just tell people about Jesus. Show them with your life. So Paul says, I was like a mother with you. But second, he says, I was like a father. Verse 11. Verse 11. For you know that we dealt with each of you as a father deals with his own children. Can I say, we're getting here to the main reason. The main reason why Paul's visit was not a waste of time. Is the main reason why Paul's visit was not without results. It's this. This is the main reason. There is a God. There is a God who dwells in unapproachable glory, who has established his kingdom, whose kingdom is the whole future of the universe. This is a God who has called humans into that kingdom and into that glory. Paul's visit to Thessalonica was not a waste of time because Paul told them about this God. Paul called them into God's kingdom and glory, and he did everything in his power to press, to urge, to push the people towards the kingdom, towards that glory. He was like a father. Does a father always make his kids happy? Does a father always flatter his kids? Is a father always soft with his kids? No, neither was Paul. Because a father has a goal for his children, and it's long term. It's their long-term good. So let's see how Paul acted towards the Thessalonians. Verse 11 and 12. For you know that we dealt with each of you as a father deals with his own children. Verse 12, encouraging, comforting, and urging you to live lives worthy of God who calls you into his kingdom and glory. The reality of God's kingdom is so real for Paul, so significant, that this becomes the main thing for him. Helping people be there, be part of it on that last day and today, living worthily of the kingdom and of God's glory. And so he preaches through opposition. He preaches even when he doesn't have time to do it, because this is the main thing. We're looking for a pastor. A pastor has many jobs. This must be the main thing. And not just for pastors, fathers, mothers, leaders of ministries. What do we want for our people? Glory? Perhaps glorious career, glorious sporting achievements. No, we want this glory that God has on offer. And so we make it the main thing to help them. We speak the gospel. We share our lives with them so that they too might share in this. Well, to summarize, we've heard the accusations against Paul. We've heard Paul's defense. He says, I've tried to be like Jesus, not getting, but giving. We've heard what that means for the Thessalonians. It means with a trustworthy leader, their faith, their church is legitimate and real. And we've tried to turn this back on us and apply it to ourselves as well and say, we should also seek to be leaders like that, like Jesus, like Paul, who don't seek to get, but give. Leaders in our churches, leaders in our homes, and leaders in community and business. We're not like the Thessalonians in some ways. Most of us have had many kinds of Christian leaders. Even today, we have leaders, Rudy, we have community groups, we have maybe other churches, we have online, we have all kinds of leaders. We thank God that many of them are trustworthy. They seek to be like Jesus. We have confidence in them. We thank God for them. And we seek to be like them as they seek to be like Jesus. Amen.